Hello there YouTube! Today I have an update on my Prima Tropicals Dupe palette. So in one of my previous videos I went through the color selection process to create a duplicate of the Prima Tropicals watercolor palette. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons, primarily because I don't want to spend the money on less expensive paints when I already have artist grade paints available in my own collection, and also just because I don't really trust their light fastness settings. I will have updates on that in the future, but for now just know that I've been reviewing the pigments and I believe I have some basis to that opinion. So we're starting off here with Phthalo Green. This is Phthalo Green Blue shade by Daniel Smith, but any phthalo green would work great here, and this is for color number 13, Island. Next up we have Daniel Smith New Gamboge. This is one of those colors that I ended up changing out a few times because I couldn't find something that I liked well enough in this spot to replace the original. The original was Coconut, number 14. The pigments are PY42 and PY14, which is really, it kind of turns out to be a yellowish, a very yellow ochre. And I just couldn't find anything that I liked well enough there, and I felt like the palette needed a sort of warmer orangey yellow, so I went with New Gamboge. Now I'm swatching out Winsor & Newton Phthalo Turquoise. I could have gone with Phthalo Blue here and that would be fine. I switched up the blues a little bit in this palette. So I have Phthalo Turquoise and you'll see the other blue coming just because I felt like they needed some differences. This is Daniel Smith Green Gold. This is in for number 16 Parrot. It's pretty much an exact replica of the original color in the Prima palette. This color is Daniel Smith Pearl Scarlet. This is standing in for Hibiscus, number 17. The swatch image from Prima shows a very orange color, but all the swatches I saw online looked more red-orange. So that's why I went with Pearl Scarlet. You could also do Scarlet Lake by Winsor & Newton or Organic Vermilion by Daniel Smith. So this is Sennelier's Forest Green, standing in for number 18, Palms. I usually don't like to cannibalize my other watercolor palettes, but in this case I just had to snag this color from my Sennelier palette. It was just perfect, and I couldn't ask for a better match. The next color is Winsor & Newton Permanent Rose, and that's standing in for number 19, Pitaya. Pitaya is kind of a weird pigment code, PR57:1. It's basically a kind of permanent magenta. I thought this color would work really well. It's a slightly darker, more purple toned pink, and I thought it worked well on the palette. The next one is everyone's favorite Dioxazine Purple, standing in for number 20, Reef. No changes here. The next color is for 21, Pineapple. I actually had a really hard time figuring out what color I wanted to use here. I finally landed on Nickel Azo Yellow by Daniel Smith. Any Nickel Azo Yellow would be great. It just has that tiny bit of brown warmth to it that just fit perfectly into this position. The next color, number 22, Sunset, uses PR81, which is basically the pigment in Opera Pink or Opera Rose. So that one was an easy pick. I used Daniel Smith's Opera Pink for this one. The next color is standing in for number 23, Ocean. Now this color is originally Prussian Blue, and I did have that color in the palette, but as I started mixing with the palette I realized that it's very difficult to make a black or a gray using the Prussian Blue and the brown that I chose. So I ended up switching out Prussian Blue for Ultramarine Blue. I know it's kind of standard and boring, but I think for mixing it will serve me better in this situation. And the final color, number 24, Tiki, is kind of a burnt umberish kind of color. I wanted something a little bit more versatile, so I went with Daniel Smith's Burnt Sienna. Daniel Smith's Burnt Sienna is already a bit darker than most burnt siennas, so I thought it would be a good option. And you'll see me mixing in a little while the Burnt Sienna and the Ultramarine Blue, and you'll see why I prefer those two colors, because in this palette you don't have a black or anything remotely close to a black to use as a darkening agent or for shadows or things like that, you could use the purple. But I would like to make sure that I have something that I can easily mix a gray or a black tone with. So Ultramarine and Burnt Sienna is kind of my go-to option. You can see here I'm swatching a lighter gray mix of Burnt Sienna and Ultramarine Blue, and then I'll do a darker mix here in a second. And you can see how easy it is to get so close to a black. I mean, that took me a couple seconds. There's not a lot of fiddling. There's not 3 colors to deal with. It's just such an easy dark shade to get to. Now I'm going to mix the Permanent Rose and the Phthalo Turquoise. You can see that gives me a shade almost exactly the same as the purple in the palette. It just has a little more dynamic color variation because it's got the pink and the purple mix. And just to show the variation, I did another mix with a little more pink in it. And this is the same mix again, just with more water. So now I'm going to show you what you can get if you mix New Gamboge with Pure Scarlet. As you'll see, you get a really nice warm orange tone. And now I'm going to mix the Nickel Azo Yellow with Pure Scarlet, just to show you the different oranges you can get. Now I'll be mixing Nickel Azo Yellow with Phthalo Turquoise. This should give me a really nice green. And if I add a little bit more Phthalo Turquoise, I get a color that is almost forest green. I just had to add in one final mix of Ultramarine Blue and Forest Green because I suspected this might give me something like Cascade Green. I was hoping. I don't think it's an exact match for Cascade Green by Daniel Smith, but it's still a nice color. I think you could push this to almost be a Perylene Green if you wanted to. So here's my final selection, all swatched out and ready to go. I hope you enjoyed this project. I really enjoyed making this palette. If you have any questions, put it in the comments down below, and I hope you will like and subscribe.